Hey everybody, I'm Cahlen Lee, and today I'm going to be answering the question, is there a right and wrong? So this question arises in our society nowadays a lot because a lot of people have come out of religious backgrounds where they were taught that there was a right and wrong, and then they grow up and they kind of sometimes realize that the religion is telling them falsehoods, and then they kind of reject it. So they kind of reject the whole picture, including the whole right and wrong thing, and they think that's just a belief, and they look at the world, the animal kingdom and things like that, and it looks like it's really a dog-eat-dog, survival of the fittest type situation. So, but we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Maybe right and wrong are actually true. Like religions obviously are saying some things which are true. That's why a lot of people resonate with them. But just because you realize that it's corrupt on some level, it doesn't mean that everything it's said is not true. So let's start from the basics and try and figure out whether or not it's true that there's a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do. Things which you have rights to do, you have the right to do them, and things which you do not have the right to do, which is a wrong. So let's start from the very basics. What is the one thing that we can know for sure without any doubts? And that's basically that this is happening, that we are having an experience, or at least we can say something is happening, right? This light of being, the reason why anything would matter. So then once we have our starting point of being as the fundamental thing which we can be sure of, we can then ask the question, well, obviously there are states of being. It's not a consistent thing and is constantly changing, and the states are different from each other. Is there inherently something right or wrong about a different experience, right? Because maybe we can say it's all just an experience, and harm and pleasure are, ultimately not different. So I think we can just kind of think about this intuitively at first, and take an example. Okay, so you are having an experience and you have someone standing out there in front of you, and it's a friend of yours, and basically there's two different possible universes that you're going to enter here. Either your friend is going to punch you in the face as hard as he can, or he's going to give you a high five, right? So there's two different futures that you could go down here. Now, the punch in the face, you are going to be injured, you're going to feel lots of pain, you're probably going to have to go to the hospital. You might suffer from whatever this is for weeks to come. Now, that's an experience, right? Then we have the other where someone gives you a high five because something awesome happened and you're both really excited about it. So you had an awesome experience with a loved one, and now you have that glow that you carry with you from that moment of that feeling of goodness. So would you say that there's ultimately no difference between those two situations? I think that we all know innately that there is a difference, and there are better experiences than others. There are horrible, horrible experiences, and there are wonderful, wonderful experiences, and everything in between. So that seems to be an aspect of the universe, the fact that experience can be good or bad. And we know that's at least true in our own case, and we can assume that it's true of all other humans. And I think we can assume it's true of all other existence, basically. I mean, I would go far to say that a metal can feel something. It has a preferential state, right? And so if you get in the way of that, then in a sense you're doing wrong. Now, I don't think necessarily we shouldn't necessarily be worrying about the experience of metal, largely because we have no way of understanding it at the moment. But maybe in the future, if we did understand metal and understood it had a preferential state, we may not want to do things to it which would take it into a world which is more hellish to it. So one thing that we have to understand about this is that right and wrong, or preferred and not preferred, depending on who you're talking about, can be different. There may be some people who actually would prefer to get punched in the face, like for some reason that's just something that they would want. Now those people are very few, I would say, who would prefer getting punched in the face over getting a sweet ass high five, but they may exist. And so it's not that getting a high five is always better. It's about what is the preference of the being that you're talking about. So now we have to talk about the fact that when we look out into nature, things don't look like they are acting in a way, or even could act in a way, which is to the benefit of most other things, right? So the animal kingdom is eating, they're all eating each other, right? And so we can say, well, that seems to be the way that things are supposed to be. I would say that yes, that is true to a point. It is dependent on the state of the environment. If the environment is in a state of lack of energy, lack of resources, then the beings in that ecosystem will prey on other beings because it's always going to prefer survival over the consequences of what they do. So it may be bad for them ultimately if they go and kill and eat something, but it's not as bad as dying, and so that's what they're going to do. And so ultimately in a situation of lack, things start kind of preying on each other and the world becomes a darker place. But when there's a state of abundance and people and other beings have everything that they need, then they don't need to do that, and they enter into a world where things are more plentiful and you're not worried about getting things. And there's some people, and I've met them, who are breatharian and they don't even need to eat, right? So they've optimized themselves and their relationship to the environment and the energy that's already available to them everywhere, and they basically don't need anything. Now this person is someone who is going to cause very little harm. Like, yes, you may walk down a path and actually accidentally step on a bug. This type of harm is ultimately unavoidable. We wouldn't be able to live lives if we were constantly worried about that. But we can drastically minimize the harm that we're causing. So then we can ask ourselves, well, okay, so I can go out there and cause harm and get things for my benefit, and if it never has any downside to me to do that, then why wouldn't I do it? And the thing is, there is a downside to you, and it's just an innate aspect of the universe called natural law, which is when basically if you go out there and you're causing harm, then the world is going to become a darker place for you. People are not going to want to relate to you. You're not going to feel good about yourself, and due to the law of correspondence, as above, so below, what you put out into the universe becomes an aspect of it in other places. And so as you're doing that, you're making your world worse when you could be doing the opposite, which is doing everything that you want to do, which you have a right to do, which doesn't harm anyone, and avoiding the harm. So now everyone is cool with you, you feel good about yourself, and you're putting out good things into the world and making the world a better place. So ultimately, natural law isn't about judgment. There isn't someone watching you and writing in a book all the bad things you do and are going to be real mad at you when you get to talk to them next time. It's not like that. The world becomes what you create. You have a certain amount of creation power in this world, and what you do influences the world. And so if you want to build a better world, then you need to be preferring situations where people are getting high fives over where people are getting punched in the face all the time. So even if you're a psychopath and you ultimately have no compassion or empathy for others, it's still in your interest to act in a way which is helpful, or at least not harming other people, because the world's going to be an easier place for you to navigate. So if we're answering this question of whether or not there are certain things which we ought do and ought not do, we have to first have a goal. But you can't answer the question of whether you should or should not do something if you don't have a goal. So any should or should always has an implied goal. So if I want to win the Olympics in gymnastics, I should probably practice gymnastics. I have a goal of doing something, I ought to do the thing which would be required for that to come to be. So if we want to live lives where we are healthy and happy and surrounded by people who love us and like being around us and who uplift us, then we need to be acting in a way towards others which is basically saying what we want. So if you want the world to be a certain way, you have to do your part. And that's kind of what magic is. It's the universe will support you in what you want if you do your portion of what that would need to be. So if our preference, if our goal is to live in a good, happy, loving world, then we ought to do things which promote that. And we ought not do things which detract from that. And natural law is really no different than gravity. It's just like, for example, if you value life, if your goal is to stay alive, then you ought not walk off a cliff because you're not going to reach your goal. Natural law is the same way. It's just a law. What you put out into the world is what you get back. And so put out the things you want. And if what you want is a world where you are not caused harm, or you are caused the minimal amount of harm, then you need to act in a way where you are not causing harm. So then back to the original question, is there a right and wrong? And if you want a world where you are not being wronged, where you are not being harmed, then yes, there's a right way to act. It is the correct answer. Do not cause harm. Do whatever you want, but just don't cause harm. So a wrong is causing harm to someone, and a right is everything that's not causing harm. You have fundamental, basic rights that are innate to your existence, which is that you have the right to do anything you want as long as you don't cause harm. So a right is anything else than harm, and that's a lot. So that's my answer to the question, is there a right and wrong? Basically, yes, there's a wrong thing to do, and that would be punching someone in the face, unless of course they had harmed you or are threatening to harm you. And then there's the right, for example, giving someone a high five where you're not harming anyone, and in fact in that situation you're probably helping them to have a better day. So definitely a right, and also a really cool thing to do. So definitely a difference between those two types of things. Be careful about getting caught into this moral relativism idea which is out there, which is that there's no difference between right and wrong, and that everything's just an experience. It's obviously not true. You know this from your own experience that that's not true. So don't fall for that lie. Of course, there's a difference between right and wrong. And if we want to live in a pretty awesome world, then we have to choose right over wrong. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. If there's anything you would like to ask me, you can head on over to ask.cahlen.org, and you can search to see if I've already answered your question, and if I haven't, you can submit it there and I'll get an email and I'll answer it with a video as soon as I can.